Having been at the head of the ABHE for almost 9 years now, and certainly been around the accrediting world before that in your other roles in Christian higher education, in your estimation, is there a better alternative than the form of accreditation that we now know?
I don't know of one that's really better from an intrinsic standpoint. The underlying assumptions of accreditation are, first of all, institutional integrity. Accreditation stands or falls to some extent on the degree to which an institution is committed to integrity and to self-scrutiny. If there's not a culture of self-scrutiny and commitment to continuous improvement, then accreditation doesn't have a lot of external leverage that can fundamentally alter that culture. But if there is generally a commitment to institutional integrity, then peer review can be a very powerful mechanism for improvement and for validation of educational quality. And I do think that it's better for higher education, for educators to set their own standards of what excellence is, just like it would be the case in almost any industry. The people who are the most engaged in it have the best idea of the best way to do things, for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In the current accrediting landscape, all of which is regulated by the U.S. Department of Education, who itself accredits accreditors, it seems that there's a rather hierarchical view of accrediting bodies, that you have the regional accrediting bodies, and then there's everybody else.
Yeah.
How does ABHE seek to try to overcome that inherent bias that exists toward the regionals as the favored approach to accreditation?
Well, interestingly, that's one area of federal policy and emphasis that favors us. The federal policy would say that it's not good for regional accreditors to be a monopoly, and they would at least give lip service to the idea that one of the great strengths of American higher education is its diversity. And therefore, a variety of accrediting agencies, specifically agencies that oversee specific, specialized, distinctive educational sectors, is actually a good thing. And there's been a lot of criticism of regional agencies because they're too general in scope, because they really overlap with one another. Again, one of the proposals that's been actually floated in this current regulatory renewal is to do away with regional accreditation, or do away with the regional boundaries and make accreditation at an institutional level more competitive, so that if folks in Kansas like the way Southern Association does accreditation more than they do North Central, they could choose to be accredited by what historically has been known the Southern region. So there could be I guess you would say, a realignment of the constellations in the offing. Having said that, the regionals are extremely powerful, and the greatest power that they have is the deference to which the majority of institutions with which the majority of institutions treat regional accreditation. Again, it's against federal policy, for example, to say in the matter of transfer credit that you have to be a graduate from an institution with regional accreditation. That's against federal policy. But at the level of practice, by college registrars and by college faculty members, and in some cases by state agencies, generally speaking, the kinds of practices that are affirmed and the kind of policies that are affirmed would say you have to be a graduate from a regionally accredited institution. So ABHE is clearly interested in that aspect of the direction of federal policy. We're part of an organization called CHIA, the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, which is the peer network for accrediting agencies. And within CHIA, again, the culture and the official policy is for parity between agencies rather than some sort of hierarchical arrangement. It remains the case, however, that regional accreditation, as in the present era, is the coin of the realm, I guess you would say. Mm-hmm. And I hope things are going to move in the direction of a more universal currency, where ABHE's currency, so to speak, is taken on a par with anybody's, because I wouldn't apologize for our standards. I would be glad to defend the quality and rigor of our standards against any other standard. But it's hard to know where that's going to go in terms of federal policy. On a personal level, we advocate for students and schools that run into roadblocks. So if a student who's a graduate of one of our schools contacts us and says, we're trying to get into such and so institution and they're playing the regional accreditation card, then we try to get involved to advocate on their behalf. We don't have any leverage really, but we do try to advocate on behalf of the students, and we encourage our schools to develop relationships with regionally accredited institutions, articulation agreements, and so on, because in the end this is the value of currency is a human. It's an assigned value,
right?
And so we hope we can change it one school at a time.
Yeah, well, it is a challenge. I just recently had a conversation with the president of the University of Minnesota, and talking to him directly, as one president to another, about accepting our students into their programs as they graduate, and he was being very diplomatic in his answer to me, but he said that it's a matter of board policy that they do not allow the transfer of credits from non-regionally accredited institutions of higher learning. And so he can defer to the board policy and say, well, we can't do this. And so it's not only a practice that's prevalent, but it's systematized by those kinds of policies that exist at many institutions.
And again, that board policy is in violation of their responsibilities under federal Title IV policy. So then it becomes a question of how far do you want to push that? What's the best way to address that and confront that issue? Sadly, the regional accrediting agencies pay lip service to the issue of parity in terms of transfer credit, but they allow these kinds of policies to stand when they have their peer review processes, instead of saying, wait a minute, you're out of compliance with federal regulations and with our association's policy, you need to change your policy. So there are power games being played sometimes. Again, I think often the best way to break through those is relationally. So the fact that you sat down in this person's office. And of course, our students' excellence begins to speak for itself. When our students are given a chance to perform in institutions of higher education, they consistently outperform other sectors. So the more we can break through those barriers in terms of actual practice, there's a lot of baggage. There's certainly the baggage of academic condescension, but then there's spiritual opposition to some of the things we stand for. And I think we have to be able to do everything we can, but we probably have to continue to expect that'll be what we have to confront.
Well, having had experience with both regional accreditors and now most recently with ABHE, I have to say, I think that the process and the standards of ABHE certainly equaled that. I would say actually exceeded that of my experience with the regionals.
So that's very gratifying for me to hear.
Well, if it is a quality perception issue on the part of the general public,
that's right,
But it has nothing to do with reality.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge, is how to overcome that perception
Right.
with the reality that is much different than what the perception would
Right.
indicate.
And we are doing some research right now that may shed some light on this issue in terms of our communication strategies. We're doing a national research project on perceptions of our sector of higher education, both within and without our immediate stakeholders. And then what would be some communication strategies that we might want to adopt that would enhance the perception in some ways. Mm-hmm. Whether that will have a spillover into the realm of accreditation, I don't know, but it could. I'd like to be optimistic about it.
It's good to be optimistic.